Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. A disconcerting and sometimes frightening time slip event seems able to occur at any time and to any one of us. These accounts sent by Weird World viewers indicate some kind of layering of events in the same location, and both have been historically verified by their witnesses. Shared experience. Derek Elwell from Bathurst in New South Wales, Australia, has reported different time slip experiences occurring in the same location but from different points in time. He described an incident which occurred to him and his wife Frances, whom he describes as somewhat fey, in the mid-1970s. The couple married in 1971, and Derek has quite often been present when Frances experiences things, although this was the only such occasion in which they have both been directly involved, even if only partially in his case. At that time, in late 1975 or early 1976, they were living in London, and Frances had been attending a weekend activity in Bristol connected with her then musical studies. On their completion, and it being a clear, sunny and crisp winter Sunday morning, they decided to do a bit of sightseeing on their way back home. Not having had a chance before then to see much outside the metropolis, they decided to head for Cheddar Gorge, a limestone gorge with tall cliffs and underground caves. They set off over the hills south of Bristol, passing to their left a village called Dundry, which has a distinctive church tower. Not far past that, the road entered a long, gentle downhill and relatively straight stretch over open heathland, with mist visible in the valley bottom beyond and a crossroads there. As they entered the mist, Frances began exclaiming that she could see a cohort of fairly tired and bedraggled Roman foot soldiers crossing their path, something that Derek himself could not see. Passing beyond the mist, they carried on until reaching Cheddar, where Frances took a comfort break while Derek studied the road atlas. This was a fairly large-scale, hardcover version. He was fascinated to see that just about where they had reached the crossroads and Frances had sighted the Roman soldiers, there was the route of an old Roman road marked. Having both encountered the same thing as far as the landscape was concerned, they thought no more about that aspect, and certainly not that, as they later realised, it might have been a mutual paranormal experience. Some years later, after their daughter Elizabeth was born, the family moved back to Australia. Over the years, Elizabeth heard of the time slip experience from both of her parents. So when in 1998 the family was back in England for a holiday and was staying near Bristol, Derek conspired with Elizabeth, without telling Frances other than where they were heading, that they would again go to Cheddar and see if Frances saw the same apparition again at the relevant place. Derek wondered if the different time of year would make a difference, as this trip took place in late spring or early summer. The family set off, duly passing the distinctive Dundry church tower to their left, so there was no question that they were on the same road. They continued on to where they expected to encounter the downhill section, but strangely, the whole landscape was different. Instead of the open heath and straight road, they were travelling along the classic winding English lane with high hedges on either side. They were now surrounded by fields and cottages that had obviously been there far longer than when they were last that way. By the time they reached a piggery on the left that they did both recall from the previous occasion, it was obvious that they had come by the same way, but with none of the landscape configuration that they otherwise recalled from then. They came to the astonishing conclusion that they had both experienced some kind of time slip, although Derek's encounter involved only the anomalous landscape. It was as if there was some kind of layering effect of the intensity of the phenomenon. This was notwithstanding the remaining puzzle that they could continue driving along a standard tarmac road that couldn't have existed in Roman times. However, the presence of Romans in the area is well acknowledged and recorded, so there was no reason why a squad of soldiers shouldn't have been marching in that area at some time. There appeared to have been no other traffic in the area at the time of Frances's experience, in keeping with the usual hushed and vacant time-slip event. They can't explain their experience in any terms other than as a genuine time-slip, and the fact that Derek partially witnessed it, as well as Frances, has made him no longer sceptical when she says that she is experiencing things. The details of Frances's observation of the weary soldiers were also confirmed by some later inadvertent research. Frances always insisted from the outset that her Roman soldiers were wearing pudding basin helmets, not the conventionally portrayed crested ones that feature in popular images of the Legionnaires. In late 1985, around 10 years after the first incident on the way to Cheddar, the family had a holiday in Italy, and during a visit to the Naples Museum, Frances was determined to inspect the displays of ancient Roman soldiers' uniforms on the top floor. In a fairly obscure cabinet in one of its furthest reaches, they came across a display of assorted Roman headgear. Among them was the exact pudding basin helmet that Frances had witnessed her ephemeral troop wearing. It was even labelled specifically as having been worn by the legions in Britain, and so with that she felt fully vindicated in her original observation. Fellow witness. Karen Chelek has shared a strange experience which happened to her on the evening of November 18, 2003. Her old place of work was a converted 5-storey building in Albemarle Street in central London, near Green Park. She worked for a recruitment company whose offices were situated on the top floor. Karen had been working very late that night, and while she was working, the security officer knocked to say that he was leaving, and all she had to do was switch the lights off downstairs. He said that he would return later to recheck and double-lock the main door. The downstairs lights were located by the lift door, and once they were switched off, it was necessary to walk a few steps in semi-darkness to the main door. The only glimpse of light was from the semicircle window above the giant door and the street light beyond it. The door was extremely heavy and tall, and Karen always felt like the shrunken Alice in Wonderland trying to open it. That night, as she approached the door, she saw a light behind her. Feeling confused, she turned around, aware that she had turned off all the lights not a moment before. She was shocked to see that everything behind her was completely different. Firstly, she noticed the stairs as they were no longer just half of a sweeping staircase. Secondly was a new pervading smell, which was an overpowering mix of burning oil, horse manure and wet hay. The floor had hay strewn about, and there was a pair of muddied riding boots next to an ornamental boot scraper with a long ornate handle. The light, Karen had noticed, was one of many along the wall. They appeared to be old-style oil lamps, which emitted a warm golden glow. She could hear horses' hooves hitting the road outside, as well as the steady patter of rain and, in the distance, a man shouting a command. Then suddenly she felt a presence of someone watching her, but no one was there. However, she could feel the intensity of their fear and terror. Just a second later, Karen herself felt completely terrified as she swung round to grapple with the door lock. As she did so, the hallway was plunged into the familiar semi-darkness. She didn't look back and ran all the way to the tube station. She then sat in shock on the train for the 30 minutes it took to reach her station. Karen initially didn't tell any of her colleagues about this experience, but she did ask the building supervisor a series of questions and then briefly told him why she was asking. He smiled back and asked if she had been drinking. She became so curious about this incident, she read up on everything to do with the area. She found out that the land had once been owned by the Duke of Devonshire, and the building where her office was located had been constructed over old properties which were part of Albemarle House. She worked out that what she saw was probably the guard's entrance from the stables up into the main house. As to her unnerving sense of being watched by an invisible observer, she believes that a person saw her as a ghost and that their terror was what she felt, which raises a question about that chilling presence. Were they experiencing a time slip and from the past or the future?